In this video, I want to talk about applying the third layer of cold molded planking on the bottom. So here you can see I've got these pieces rough cut out, and what I did this time is I did not apply this as these first two pieces as a single 8-foot long piece cut. It's just a lot of epoxy to mix and spread when you're doing the whole piece. So I decided that for this layer I would cut this in half, and it made it easier. And if you notice, the angles of these boards are going opposite of the previous layer. And I've got the battens marked just so when I use my longer composite nails in the battens I knew where they were, just like I had done before. I talked about that in the previous videos. So here are the first two pieces epoxied on there, and again I used the silver tip System 3 silver tip epoxy, and I applied encapsulating epoxy where the pieces were going to go on the boat and the back side of these, and then I went ahead and applied thicken epoxy to both of those surfaces. I started doing that. I didn't do that initially, but started doing that for later layers. So now I'm working my way forward. Here's the next piece of this first big 8-foot section in effect, and that's the other side of it, and working my way forward. And one thing as a reminder, the leading edge of each piece you're laying down, like when I was laying this piece down, the edge of this piece is squared off, but the front, this mating edge, not leading edge, but mating edge, has a bevel on it to allow for some epoxy squeeze out. So I did that for each one of these, all of the cold molded pieces, except for the first layer. Doesn't make sense. You don't need to do it on the very first layer of planking because you just have air behind the pieces. And here's the other side, those next four pieces, working my way forward, and you can see how the angles are opposite. You just want a good opposite angle. Doesn't have to be any perfect angle, and as you actually move further towards the boat, the angle changes anyway, so it's not like you can keep it the exact same, but you just want a good crossing kind of an angle like this. And as I went along, I believe I mentioned this in a previous video, where I would go ahead and fill in if there's a little bit of gap in between these with epoxy as I went along. It's just easier to do that as you go. At least it was for me. It saved some time. But you want those gaps to be as small as possible. But I still recommend filling in with some epoxy. And also, as a reminder, this bottom layer, third planking layer, is lapping over the side planking, the second layer of side planking. And this is where I've made it all the way to the front and started trimming, and you can see this is overhanging now. It is an overlap because the angle here is pretty similar, so you get almost kind of a butt joint edge. But later in another video, when I talk about preparing for final side planking, the next layer that will go on the sides is final side planking pretty wood, and I talk about how to deal with this edge then in that video. So here's just the other side. I've made it all the way forward with the third layer planking, and you can see that edge again. And as you move back here, then it starts where it actually laps over. I can zoom in where you can see that this outer edge of the third layer is flush with the side planking, but up in here it's not quite flush. But again, that gets dealt with when I'm preparing for final side planking. So this is just showing what it looks like after the third layer is all done and everything is trimmed. I still have some sanding to do where I applied epoxy in these seams, but you can see how it looks all back in here where this outer edge, you can see it flush now with the outer edge of the second layer side planking. So that's the third layer of bottom planking.